There is no one who exists who doesn't have a family. However that may be defined, whether, by traditional definition or new definition, which, I won't get into that, but nobody can be born without a mother and a father. So this is the feast day of the family. So I encourage you, I know people pray the rosary after Mass, maybe just to drop by and visit the beautiful carving that's over there now in that altar, and just for a few moments of reflection, or you could just remain in the church, a few moments of reflection on the Holy Family. It really is your feast day. It's our feast day, really, because, of course, I have a family as well. It's our feast day in a way. The family is just so important. And we know that, there's an old saying, you can choose your friends, you can't choose your family. So remember that when they make you red with, anger and craziness. We can't choose our family, right? So family, it involves a whole bunch of virtues or vices. Hopefully we're working towards the virtues with what we have, the kind of the tools, if you will, that we have of our faith. I'm going to mention a couple. It's one of the most beautiful readings in the Office of Readings, and that's the one from St. Paul VI on the Holy Family. Mention a few things that we can learn, but he only scratches the surface. The family life is really the remote preparation for marriage. Because basically married couples, if you think about it, you look into the mirror, look into yourself, and sometimes it's humbling, sometimes it's irritating to realize how much you deal with your spouse in the same way your mom and dad dealt with each other. Because we grew up and we just absorbed it. Now, you can, if it was a bad way, they fought a lot and they never resolved their fighting. It's one thing to fight, but it's how you fight and do you resolve your fights. I always say if you fight in front of the kids, resolve it in front of the kids so they learn how to resolve arguments. And of course, do it respectfully. Anyways, we learn these things whether we like it or not. It's like the air we breathe in. So many of our reactions are because of what we learn from our mothers and fathers. So the family is, of course, a place where we develop a lot of vices or failings, but we also can develop a lot of virtues. So it's good to identify the weaknesses we have. And I'm not saying blame mommy and daddy for everything, like modern psychology tends to do is, oh, mommy and daddy, they're the cause of my woes. And we all got to grow up at a certain point. So I'm not about coddling people, as it were. But, these things, we identify them, and then we strive to grow. Always strive to grow, and never the blame game, because what does this do except, it doesn't even make us feel good when we do the blame game. But it identifies things with a purpose, and the purpose is to grow. Offer contrition for our own sins, don't blame everything on our mom and dad and all that kind of stuff, but take responsibility for our own actions. So it's so important that we meditate on our family life and thank God for our family one way or the other. So there's three things that Pope Paul identifies about the family of Nazareth that we can learn from the Holy Family. And, we have to get rid of this idea, well, they're the perfect family, so my family's not perfect. My family is not perfect, and you could probably say the same thing about your own. In its own way, it's not perfect. So how can we relate to the Holy Family? Because Mary and Joseph never fought. Never. Jesus always did what he was supposed to do. Do you? I don't. So then we can distance ourselves and say, well, I can't relate to that. Well, we can. All right, because God doesn't expect us to be Jesus. There's only one Jesus. He's the Son of God. But God does expect me to be the best version of myself, to strive to be a saint. That's the lifelong project. So these are the three things that Paul VI points out. Number one, he says we can learn from the Holy Family's silence. Now, there are many kinds of silence. There can be the silence of anger, or there can be the silence that is positive. In other words, it's cultivating an interior silence in order to appreciate in our own time that place within ourselves and even externally how we need to cultivate an intimacy with God. And we know in our society, the society in which we live, we are almost addicted to distractions. We suffer from distractions, but there's a point when if you try to eliminate all the distractions in your day, go ahead and try. And I'm not saying, you shut down your computer if you have to work on your computer for work. But when it's all done, just try and shut it down and just try and cultivate silence for an hour or two. It's almost like we need to hear noise. People put on the TV in the background, while they're making something in the kitchen or something. They got to have noise, right? And there's good noise, and it's one thing if it's classical music or Gregorian chant, but if it's like, whatever, I don't know what even the modern version of stuff is right now, but if it's the stuff that's always in the background, it's like, why do I have to be subject to noise all the time? What about silence? And cultivating that opportunity to actually commune with the Holy Family. We should not underestimate silence, the Pope says. The silence of Nazareth should teach us how to meditate in peace and quiet. Many times people can't pray because they don't know how to be quiet, externally, but even internally. He says to reflect on the deeply spiritual, and to be open to the voice of God's inner wisdom and the counsel of his true teachers. So that's the first thing, is the importance of silence. Secondly, he says we can learn about family life, obviously, in Nazareth. Nazareth can serve as a model for what a family should be, even if ours comes up, very short of this. It's things like giving of self for the good of the other, serving without being asked, showing love by deeds, and not just by sweet words, as St. Josemaria used to say. It means perhaps making a time to pray. It doesn't, not forcing anybody, but at least, creating the opportunity to pray. It could be a decade of the Rosary once a week. It could be every day. There's all sorts of possibilities. They're virtually endless. But all of this is meant to kind of cultivate an awareness within ourselves and open ourselves up to the fact that I'm not here just for myself. I'm here for a purpose. You are here for a purpose. Kids are here for a purpose. The purpose is to love God and to love other people, and God will help them find out if they're supposed to be, married, single, or celibate, and a doctor or a plumber or whatever. All of those questions come later in life. But it's so important that we learn those values, those virtues at home, and it prepares them for future marriage or the priesthood. You want a bad priest, look at his life. I'm not saying, you blame everything on the family life, but many times the priests, if they're not all that stable, you wonder, well, have they ever really faced their family background? Bad marriages, family background, and so on. So it's so important that we cultivate an atmosphere where husband and wife, kids can grow in virtues, learn to serve each other. And it's so important that kids be made to do chores. I have no idea what the pedagogy or the teaching, of kids is today, but when I was young, here goes the old guy saying, when I was young, but I had to make my bed. And we had to do the dishes. We didn't have dishwashers in those days. And my mother would, of course, there's 4 boys. My sister was the eldest. She was gone, so the boys had to duke it out. And I hated the dishes. But I understood the importance. Now I understand the importance of it. We had to do housework. My mother used to say, well, you have to learn to do this stuff because if you live on your own, what do you think you're going to do? Hire a maid? Maybe. But you got to learn how to make your bed. You got to learn how to clean the toilets. You got to learn how to vacuum. It's not something that's infused in us. We've got to learn how to do it. Kids should be made to learn how to do this, I think. It's a good skill. It's a good domestic skill. And boys realize it's not just the woman's job. If you divide your duties between men and women, fine. But it's not just the woman's job. It's everybody's task. And so these are really, really super important things. And the final thing he says is in Nazareth, the home of a craftsman's son, we learn about the dignity of work and the discipline it entails. So he talks about the dignity of work, and he goes on to say that on the one hand, work has a dignity unto itself, but it's not an end unto itself. So its value and free character, however, derive not only from its place in the economic system, but rather from the purpose that it serves. So work is a means to an end. It dignifies the human person, but it's not an end unto itself. God is the end, is the only true end unto our life. So yes, we must do our work well. We must work hard, be disciplined, show up on time and things like this. But always remember that God, are we serving God in the process? Are we making of it our pleasing sacrifice to God? You know, is our work truly serving our supernatural good? Or is it just a paycheck? Which leads to a lot of resentment and fatigue and bad things in relation to work. So these three things are so important for us on this Feast of the Holy Family, what we can learn from Our Lady, St. Joseph, and the Christ child. Number one, from its silence. Number two, about family life. And number three, about the dignity of work.